Lots of divisive topics come up in our society, such as issues of gun rights, drug use, abortion, education, and many others. In fact, the list could go on forever. But one thing that really divided the people down the middle in places like the United States is the support of the death penalty. Outdated. You don't get to choose who lives and who dies. Atrocious, brutal, every state should have it. Archaic, barbaric punishment, great idea. Silly to keep them alive, fed and clothed. Such words coming from people when asked what they think about the death penalty. Since it became a legal ability for a state to carry out such an act, people's support and opposition comes and goes as well, reigniting the issues when it seems everybody already forgot, especially if someone is up for execution. There are quite a number of reasons why people support the death penalty. An eye for an eye mentality. The prisoners deserve it. They will just repeat the crime and just to set an example. It is always debatable whether these claims are true. The controversy continues to rage around the world and there is no clear consensus on where people really stand. However, did you ever wonder what it's like for the person actually facing the death penalty for the crime they did, or they did not? Anyone who comes close to the end and is powerless to stop it will experience a wide range of emotions that are difficult to categorize. This is the feeling shared by many prisoners who have been subjected to capital punishment. What is it really like for someone who is on the brink of death, a death that is so brutal? Though it is only awarded for those who are proven worst of the worst, still, their last days in prisons are worthwhile to explore so as to decide whether you would support or oppose such punishment. The procedure for execution can vary from place to place, but it is pretty similar 7 days until the day of the execution. Honestly, getting to the final days is a challenge within itself. Knowing that people on death row waited years and sometimes decades to reach such a moment they had been fighting against and appealing at every turn. 20 years is the average time spent on death row, yet a prisoner is usually given notice of the execution 60 days in advance of a pending order to fulfill the execution. Petitions to achieve clemency happen during this time, being done by the activists who oppose death penalty. It has been reported that some criminals have opted to see their death sentence to term instead of submitting to such acts. The same can be said of Scott Dozier, who waived his appeal rights after being on death row for 10 years, and told the judge he was ready to die. Why do you think he chose it that way? Does he want to die so badly? When asked, Dozier claimed that it would be a straightforward legal action since he already spent millions of dollars cramming the death penalty down, and millions on the death chamber and some more thousands while waiting and all. Quite a torture, yeah? We speak so much about the final moments, but the build-up can be decades for the death row inmates. Decades of fighting to survive, even if it meant spending the rest of their lives in prison. It would be insincere to say that every criminal treats their fate on death row the same. Scott Dozier is fighting to die, while many are fighting to live. States are now facing a challenge, since lethal injections are running out and so carrying executions are being delayed. Just like Nevada, which has 70 men on death row, yet they have not executed anybody for 12 years. As soon as Dozier volunteered in October 2016, the state was in a tailspin since they had no way to execute him. As time goes by, death penalty faces more and more scrutiny as time has gone on. Drug manufacturers have distanced themselves from the practice. With this, states were left figuring out how to move ahead with future executions. The end of the death penalty in America is on the horizon, but not here in South Carolina. At their death row, they are expanding, building a firing squad. Why does it seem like it's happening everywhere, whereas this is just one state? Because the floodgates had now been opened. The goal isn't to eliminate the death penalty, but to find a way to keep it going until it can be abolished. One method that is intensely being looked at using a drug that killed hundreds of thousands of Americans long far beyond the walls of prison: fentanyl. Other states are attempting to create their own source of lethal injections. In Oklahoma, however, a new drug combination was being tested. The concern during that time was that the drugs were not having the effect concerns indeed. The veins and the locket arms that were taking the poison exploded, according to the officials. Such a horrible thing to witness. The annoying feeling of death hanging over an inmate like a dark cloud is the biggest difference within the 24 hours than the week before the execution. Knowing all about the execution and the possibility that something might go wrong, fear of dying is a deafening reality for anybody on death row. Some prisoners never stop fighting until the day of their impending death, looking for any potential opening to halt the order or relying on the workings of their families or the activists. In some rare cases, death row inmates are actually interviewed by local and international broadcasters depending on the notoriety of the criminal. A famous example of this was Ted Bundy, who was extensively interviewed before his death, and there are still many others. The 1994 Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh also went on the record. But the truth of the matter was the difficult times the families and state officials are being hauled down beyond the walls of the prison, tortured by the stress of knowing that their loved ones will be executed regardless of their crime. The final 24 hours gets really serious, where feelings of desperation and despair turn into solemn sadness. A prisoner facing execution is transported to the death house by nightfall at around 8 p.m. on the day before the execution, ensuring that the inmate is not carrying anything that could help him escape or cause himself any harm. Tensions are high among everyone during these hours, just like an eerie moment that lingers as the prisoners look at the world they would never see again. Waiting for their death in a heavily guarded facility at 9 p.m, the searched prisoners booked in. They are now on the death watch, put in a cell near the execution chamber, alone but in constant surveillance. They won't be treated like the treatment for standard prisoners. There, it is more accommodating, better than the standard cells, cleaner, with more private amenities. In short, a far better place to spend your last days, but definitely not the place any prisoners want to spend their final days. It has a shower, a sink, a toilet, and a desk, and access to the phone immediately right outside. Yet, definitely a difficult time for a prisoner to endure when sleeping is not really an option, finding any ways to keep themselves busy. At 4 a.m, the prisoner is woken up early. This could vary from place to place, but is pretty common across the board nowadays. On the day of finality, the prisoner is given the chance to contact his family and friends or see them in person, and to be visited by a chaplain. There might be some chances for actively fought petitions to save them, which is just what happened in November 2021, where Julius Jones had been called by Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt before his intended execution. With calls made and after seeing the people they had hoped to see and visit from the chaplain, a crushing weight of the end sets in this time. There is no more chance that a tragic end could be avoided. Now, while the guards are testing out the facilities, they will be left alone, counting down the hours remaining, keeping contact with the governor's office. At 10:30 a.m, the prisoner is given lunch. Nothing special, but they get to eat alone for a moment, after which it's time to prepare for their demise. At 3 p.m, when the electric chair was still widely used, the prisoner was required to shave. Since lethal injections are becoming more common, this step is no longer followed. The prisoner shall take a shower before dressing in the clothes provided by the state, a prison uniform but far nicer than the usual ones. 4:30 p.m, time to wrap it all up and enjoy the last meal. This is well decided ahead of time, where the prisoner will be given almost anything that he desires to eat. There were some exceptional examples where prisons were given a simple meal in some places and preference of whether the prisoner or the state. One example of this is a meal request from John Wayne Gacy, who ordered an unreasonable amount of food and drinks such as KFC and fried shrimps, and Eileen Wunos, who just asked for a cup of coffee. A bitter farewell at 5 p.m. About 90 minutes before, they will be preparing the prisoner for a lethal injection and hooking up IV tubes. He will then be brought into the chamber and witnesses are escorted in to view the execution. If there are no delays, he is set to die at 8 p.m. Family, friends, journalists, and even victims of the crimes he had committed will witness and will watch from a separate room that looks in through one-way glass. The prisoner will be given a chance to say his final words. It is very uncommon for the inmate on death row to cause more trouble while getting ready to die, since in the last days of their life they may have come to fully surrender their fate. Some still resist, but this is really uncommon. The actual execution is a relatively clean procedure and won't be eventful unless the execution itself becomes an issue, like malfunctioning of the chair, trouble in administering the lethal dose, or the prisoner's veins cannot be located easily. Yes, this could be a stressful situation. And lastly, the coroner pronounces the death of the defendant and an autopsy will be done. The body will be released to the family for a proper burial. What do you think of our video today? Let us know.